It says we're live. We're live. We're live, everybody. Let me see if this will open up. If it's working. Is it working? Error loading. Oh, try again. It says we're live. Yes. What's up, Sheldon? Good to see you, man. Hope you're having an amazing day. Oh, life is good. It has been a great week over here in Friendly Giant Land. First of all, let me welcome you, or wish you a happy Friendly Giant Fridays. That is what I have called Fridays. It's Friendly Giant Fridays. And I'm excited to hang out with you guys for a little bit today. We're going to be going through my storytelling framework. So if you can see in the comments, if you don't have your free copy of my storytelling framework, go to friendlygiantfilms.com and you can download it. It'll take you 30 seconds. You can download it immediately on the page. So go and do that, and then you can follow along as well and jot some notes and all that kind of stuff. But that's what we're going to be talking about today. But first, man, it's been a crazy week. I've been trying to get the yard in good shape. The front yard, the grass is looking good, but the backyard is in bad shape. It has been so neglected for over 10 years, and I'm putting some work in. And my pointer finger from pulling, there's quack grass in the back, and I won't get into a big old long story of what quack grass does and why it stinks and stuff. But I've been pulling it like piece by piece, and my finger hurts from getting in there all the way down to the ground, to the roots, and pulling and all that kind of stuff. But progress is being made, which is awesome. But enough about my yard. You guys don't care about that. I just figured, that's some of the stuff that I do to kind of clear my mind and think through things, and it's just fun. But today we are going to be talking about my storytelling framework, okay? We're going to go through all of the 9 steps. I'm just going to train you on what these 9 steps are, why they're so important, and why they will help you when you build your stories with this framework through these 9 steps, that you can become a master seller with your stories, just like whoever your favorite marketing celebrity or your guru that you follow or the coaches that you see. You're going to see how you can take your stories, build them on this framework, and go to work and all that stuff. Does that sound cool? Are you guys excited for that? If you are, let me know in the comments. If you are watching this live or on the replay, let me know. But also comment and let me know where you are from, so that we can all, it's fun for me to be able to see where everyone is, but it's also fun for you to be able to see where your network and your support group and where your people are too, okay? So we're going to jump in to the storytelling framework, and let's get started. All right. Happy Friday, everyone. It's Friendly Giant Fridays, and I am excited to be here with you today. We are going to be talking about my storytelling framework. I'll give a little background about where it came from and how it was developed, but we're going to be talking about how to use this framework for you to become a master seller through your stories. Okay, that's what we're going to do. So if you're here with us live or on the replay, let me know in the comments, and let's talk. If you have any questions during any of this, ask them. I will address and answer any questions that you have about it, okay? Really quickly, if you are new here, my name is Nick Fitzgerald. I am known as the Friendly Giant. I am the founder of Friendly Giant Films. I'm a husband, a father, a best-selling author, and a storytelling marketer, okay? I help entrepreneurs and businesses leverage their stories and experiences to sell more of their products and services. And I do this to help them build strong, long-lasting connections and relationships with their audience, so they come back again and again rather than having transactions, okay? And I do this by building these stories all upon my proven storytelling framework, okay? So that's enough about me. Let's jump right into this, okay? So first off, let me just ask a question, and you can think of this internally, or you can answer in the comments, whatever you're comfortable with. But when it comes to your business and your sales process and your audience and all those kinds of things, answer this question. Are you getting the engagement that you have always wanted with your audience? Do you have a list or a group of clients or customers that come back again and again and are happy to pay you? And then finally, are you happy with the amount of sales that you're getting when you do focus and tell your stories? Okay? Answer those questions and think about those. And I want you to say if the answer to any of those or all three of those is no, I want you to know that it's not your fault. It's okay, because you have been set up to fail by the people that you follow and that you work with and all that kind of stuff, okay? So don't beat yourself up about it or get discouraged if you answered no to any of those questions. So I mentioned that I'm a storytelling marketer. Now, what does that mean? Back in 2015, I started my own business. I've been professionally telling stories for 5 years now. And it's been a wild ride. And it's been super fun, but I've worked in TV and commercials. I've worked on 13 Hollywood feature films. I've worked on commercials, and I was a freelance photojournalist for NBC here in Utah. And I have just been like totally immersed in storytelling and working in lots of different mediums. But then also I'm a student of marketing. I love to see how sales processes work and all those kinds of things. And I just am a nerd for a good story. I've always loved stories. If you can see by my background, I love Star Wars. I'm debuting a new shirt. This Top Gun shirt was given to me on Father's Day. It's just an awesome shirt. Thank you to my wife and kids for this. But stories have just been something that I've always obsessed about, okay? And in 2015, when I started my own business, I wanted to have a video production company, and I wanted to help businesses tell their stories, okay? And so as I started doing this, amazing things started to happen, and I started to grow my business, grow an audience, all sorts of cool stuff. And you know, my journey led me down working on feature films and working on TV shows and commercials and shooting news stories and all these things, working with Oscar winners and Emmy winners and all this fun stuff. And by doing that, I started to see that storytelling wasn't just like something that was awesome to be able to build connections or get, you know, go on dates and get people to build a relationship with you or that kind of stuff. I was seeing very clearly how stories were used to sell and to make money. Hollywood is there for entertainment, yes, but they invest millions of dollars in the production of those movies and TV shows, and they need that investment back, okay? So even though we are fully entertained, they are designed to make money. And it's a business. And, you know, I remember a few weeks ago, man, it's probably a month or so ago, I went back and looked at the box office records or the box office numbers. They started reporting the annual box office numbers back in 1970. That's as far back as I could go. But, you know, film has been around since the 1920s. But box office numbers were started to be reported and recorded in 1970. And since 1970 to 2020, it has done just from box office, just from ticket sales alone, nearly $1 trillion. It's like 700 and something billion dollars that they have done just in ticket sales since 1970. That's amazing, okay? So again, as I started to see the business side of it, and I was getting really good at my technical skills. I was on the lighting crews and camera crews, so I learned those skills very well. But I wanted to be able to help businesses, you know, like mine. I had a small business where I didn't have an audience and all that stuff. I needed to create marketing messages for my business. So I started to put those things to work that I was learning on the storytelling and through my whole life's obsession with story. And I started to tell stories for myself, and I saw a lot of growth, okay? But, and the reason I share all this is just for you to understand my background and where this framework came from, okay? We're going to dive in just a second to these 9 steps. But like, I just want to help you understand where this came from and why this is important. You know, I've always been a storyteller in all of my jobs and all of my career paths and all the relationships. I've noticed that storytelling is the thing that propels us forward in getting a sale, in building a relationship, in building trust. And I've seen it used to multiply people's wealth as well, okay? And so I started telling stories for my business, and guess what? It worked. I started to specifically and intentionally do some things with my stories and how I presented my message to my audience that I started getting referrals. I started getting people saying, hey, can we hop on a Zoom call and talk about this? And all these types of things. And I spent hours and hours and hours with people, giving for free and helping people understand and testing out some things with some people. And it was incredible, the results that they got. And then it was also incredible the results that I saw with my business. My audience started growing. I started having opportunities to speak to more people and have a more broad audience. People were having me on and inviting me to be a podcast guest. All these types of things. I've ultimately got asked and invited to speak on stage with Russell Brunson. And if you don't know who he is, he owns a company called ClickFunnels. He's an old friend of mine. And he saw my journey, and it opened the door for me to coming on stage with him and sharing some of my story to 600 people at the time, but it's been released as a podcast episode to over 100,000 people. And was a lot of fun. I also got to speak on stage in front of 5,000 people at Funnel Hacking Live 2019 in Nashville, Tennessee, and things like that. So I saw my business grow as I was telling my stories, but as I was helping other people tell their stories and moving them along, I was seeing their growth, but then I saw the rewards to myself and my business, okay? So that's where this whole storytelling framework stuff comes from. It's from an entire life's commitment and study of stories and storytelling, trying things out myself, testing what works and what doesn't, and then giving advice and guidance to other people and seeing what worked and what didn't, and then putting it all together into something that's easy for you to consume. Okay. So again, if you haven't already, I'll just throw this link up on here one more time. If you haven't got a copy of my storytelling framework, it's a free PDF download. You go to friendlygiantfilms.com. It's always mirrored. I never know where to point. friendlygiantfilms.com, and you can download it and have it as a resource to refer back to over and over again. Okay. But this framework came as I had the epiphany, the light bulb moment when I was in Nashville earlier this year at Funnel Hacking Live 2020. And the people were talking about frameworks and how they have these things and systems in place and how it helps them with their business, but also helps them serve their audience. And I started to realize I have systems and frameworks and stuff for a lot of the things that I do. And so I decided I'm going to put my storytelling framework together because so many people ask me for help with stories. I know so many are stuck. You may be one of those people that has hired a guru or got into a coaching program or went through a challenge or has people that you just admire and study and follow in social media that talk about storytelling and how important it is, and tell you that you need to be telling your stories, but you don't really get any real tactical, strategical, nuts and bolts stuff, guidance on how to actually do it, what needs to go into your stories, and how to structure the stories so that they, go forward and do what you want them to do. Okay. So I decided I'm going to put this together, and I started listing out all the things that, when I am crafting a story with somebody or for myself, what do I do? What's my process? And so we're going to dive right in and start with the 9 steps. Okay. So who's still with me? If you have any questions, drop them in the comments and I will stop and we'll pause and I'll answer them and all that kind of stuff. But we're going to go through each one of these 9 steps right now, so that you guys can understand what goes into powerful, intentional stories that build your brand, sell more of your stuff. You guys cool with that? If you are, leave me some hearts and emojis while I grab a drink and we'll jump right in. Okay. So, step number 1 in my storytelling framework, and this is so foundational. I put it, this is why it's step number 1, and it is begin with the end in mind. Sheldon is ready to rock and roll. Let's do this. Yes. Okay. So step number 1 in this framework is begin with the end in mind. Okay. That phrase has kind of been popularized by Stephen R. Covey in his 7 Habits for Highly Successful Individuals. And it is actually step 2 in his framework, but it's step 1 in mine. And this is why. As entrepreneurs, we have to be intentional. From the moment we wake up to the time we go to bed, even during the time that we're sleeping, typically we're being intentional about what we're doing. Okay. And as business owners, we have to be intentional with everything. And our marketing, our messages, our stories have to be intentional. Okay. There has to be a purpose behind it. How many times have you been at a party or a networking event or a family reunion even where somebody is just talking your ear off and you are just like wanting to get out of the conversation? You're looking for any excuse or opportunity to bounce out of it because they're just talking and talking and talking. There's no purpose to what they're saying. They just like to hear the sound of their own voice. Okay? How many of you have had that experience? Raise your hands or put it in the comment. Okay? A lot of us have been guilty of doing that as well. Okay? But as entrepreneurs, we have to be intentional, okay? So every story that we tell in our business has to have a purpose behind it. We need to think before we ever write a single word of copy or write any words in our script or do anything else, is we need to have the end in mind and think what that purpose is. Now, sometimes that's hard and it's a little bit of a struggle, okay? And in order to overcome that hurdle, because, it's like, oh, what do I want to talk about, right? I tell everyone to ask themselves these 3 questions. So write these down if you don't have, or if you have a notepad, or highlight these if you have the storytelling framework download. But ask yourself what you want the audience to feel, think, and do as a result of this story, okay? When you ask yourself that question and you give honest answers, okay, what do you want them to feel, think, and do? Feel, in that order specifically too. What do you want them to feel first? What emotional response do you want them to have to hearing this story? What emotions do you want to stir? What do you want them to feel? Okay. When you do that, then that engages the thought process. Because, typically, when we're talking to our audiences, we want to get them to make an emotional decision, but some people need more time or weigh other options and data outside of just what they feel, okay? So when you get the emotional foundation laid, you move on to the think. What thought process do you want them to engage in? What do you want them to be thinking about? Typically, it's good to have them start thinking about what their life is like now versus what it will be like when they partner with you, right? Just paint and see, help them think about and analyze that difference. Okay. And then what action do you want them to take? Okay. When we tell our stories, not every story has to have a sales pitch at the end of it, right? It doesn't always have to be like, go and buy this thing. It could, your action, what you want them to do might be to subscribe to your email list or like this page or, share this thing or download this free guide or whatever it might be. So when you have those things in mind, again, beginning with the end in mind, now you know where you want your audience to go emotionally, mentally, and what you want them to actually do. Okay. So, and the reason why that's so important to do right at the beginning and ask those questions is because how many of you fall into one of these categories? You're like, but Nick, I'm not interesting. I don't have a bunch of stories to tell. Are people even going to care? Who's going to listen to me? I'm a boring regular person. Or you're like, Nick, I have so many things that I could share, and I've had a crazy life and all sorts of challenges, but I don't know where to begin. Like, what should I share versus keep personal or private? That kind of thing. You fall into one of those 2 camps mostly. But when you begin with the end in mind and you go through and you ask yourselves those questions, guess what? Now you can work backwards. You reverse engineer it. You start to, now that I know what I want them to feel, I want them to think, and what I want them to do. What experiences have I had that I can share that will lead people to those conclusions? What things have I witnessed in the world that I can share? Okay. And you start to identify the stories that you can share within this overall story. And it just makes reverse engineering it so much easier. Russell Brunson talks hook, story, offer. Dean Graziosi talks about hook, story, close. When you want to get when you finish with the end and you know what action, what feelings, what thoughts you want them to have, Then you can work on the stories and stuff that support that. Okay. So beginning with the end in mind is all about setting an intention and purpose in our stories, not about blathering or just pushing live for the sake of going live. I love so many of the gurus. I follow them. I pay them. I'm coached by them. I'm in their programs and their email lists and their Facebook groups and all these kinds of things. But nothing drives me more crazy than when they tell you to publish every day or be you but louder and all these things, and they don't show you how to actually do that. You don't have the luxury of time of years and things like that to struggle through and eventually figure out your message when you have a family or employees or things like that you're trying to make sure that you're taking care of. Okay, there's one thing to publish for the sake of it, but when you're not intentional about it, you miss out on a whole lot of heartache. You cut down, when you are intentional, you chop down the timeline of identifying the right kinds of stories. Okay, so that's step number one. Begin with the end in mind. Do you guys have any questions on that? Again, if you're watching on the live or if you're on the replay, drop them in the comments and I will respond to them. Okay, but that's step number one. Begin with the end in mind. You guys still with me? Okay. Step number two is that every story has three simple things: a beginning, a middle, and an end. Now, I know that sounds, I always get chuckles and people kind of tease me when I put it like that because it's so simple. But like I said at the beginning, when people are just waffling through their stories, they're where there's no end in sight, right? They get lost and they lose the audience. The structure of your story is important. And there's a beginning, a middle, and end to every story, but every great story does very specific things within those three areas, okay? There are very specific things that you want to do in the beginning portions of your story. The middle is all about doing certain things, and then the end is all about, has some very specific things that happen. Every great story, every great movie, every great series, or whatever it is that you've seen, every great webinar, and marketing piece, they have a beginning, a middle, and an end. Okay. So step number two is about understanding that there's a structure to the story, and how in the beginning, it's all about getting people's attention and getting people to buy in to the cause. The middle is all about escalating the conflict and the problems and the character development during the story. And then the end, of course, is the resolution. Okay, so and it's just simple structure, but is super powerful when done correctly. When it's done, how many of you have watched a movie that just kind of went along where we meet a character or we meet like a million characters and we can't keep track of who's who and who's doing what and what's going on? What are they? I thought they were going to do that. What's going on? And there's a lot of confusion. They didn't follow the structure. Okay. They lost the audience. And when you follow the structure and build your stories on the structure, your intentional stories upon this structure of the beginning, middle, and end, your audience comes on the journey with you. You invite them to come into the journey with you and go forward. Okay. That is the power of the structure of a story. Okay. So that's just, I could go for hours on the actual structure elements, but we don't have time for that here. I could go for hours just on the structure elements of it alone. But the next few steps in the framework are parts that fit into these structures, and I'll tell you where in the story structure they fit, just so you can kind of see. Does that make sense? Okay, so again, step number two is every story has a beginning, a middle, and an end, but every great story does very specific things within those areas. Okay, so step number three, and this is obviously fits into the beginning portion of the story, is introduce the conflict and the problems early. How many times have you watched a movie or a TV show or listened to somebody speak on stage and they went for 5 minutes, 10 minutes without talking about any conflict or any challenges? You've never done that. At least not with somebody who's good at what they do. Okay? Every movie You are introduced to the conflict early. Star Wars is my favorite example. Star Wars A New Hope. The very first line in the title crawl, in the words that go up the screen, is "It is a period of civil war." We are introduced to the conflict in the first sentence of the movie. Okay. And then from there, we read about the conflict and what's going on with the rebels and the empire and things like that. But then it wasn't just like we went and panned down and we sat through a discussion about X, Y, and Z or heard a bunch of dialogue. No. What happens next? A small spaceship goes zooming over the screen and it's shooting laser beams backwards. So we know it's being chased. And then this huge Star Destroyer comes shadowing over. Right? And it's shooting laser beams at the small ship. So we all of a sudden realize and understand that that little ship is in deep trouble. Okay? We're thrust right into the conflict right from the very beginning. The first 6 minutes of the Lord of the Rings, the Fellowship of the Ring, is all about talking about the conflict and the creation of the One Ring and Sauron and all of these things. Okay? Back to the Future, the first 4 minutes, we get introduced to the conflict in very subtle ways, too. And then as that first scene ends and Marty McFly is going to school and all that stuff, we learn more about the conflict. We're put into it immediately. Okay? When we introduce the conflict early, this is what happens. We get the audience to side with us or to choose us. As marketers, as entrepreneurs, we want to be doing two things. We want to be attracting the right people to us, and we want to be repelling all the people who will waste our time, who don't agree with us, who don't want to buy our products and services. We don't want to try and strong arm or convince them into liking us and buying our stuff. The stories that we share will get people to either come in or go away. Okay? So that is why we need to introduce the conflict early. The quicker you can get the audience to make that decision to choose you or to follow you or to join you on this journey through this story, the longer they're going to stay, but the quicker they've made a decision of choosing you already. Then down the line, when you make an offer for them to buy or partner or, that do part of feel, think, and do, then they are prepared even more because they've already made some decisions to choose you along the way. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. If it does, drop me some hearts or emojis or a comment and let me know. And we'll move on to step number 4, okay, which is introduce the key characters. Now, every great story is rarely a solo story of somebody who lives in isolation and doesn't have a support system or characters that help them move along. Okay. When we introduce the key characters, again, we don't have to introduce everybody, but we introduce the key characters. That is how we get more audience buy-in. Let me grab a drink really quick. My throat's getting scratchy. Cool. Sheldon's getting it. Love it. Thanks, dude. Appreciate it. Glad that you're here, man. And it's just you and I right now, so feel free to ask any questions, okay? So when we introduce the key characters, this is what happens. You are the hero of your story, okay? But you didn't go on your journey alone. You had, a spouse or a loved one or business partners or coworkers or a boss or, friends and family members and all these different types of people that have been part of your story. That have been an integral part of your journey, okay? And when you introduce the key characters, it does a couple of things. First, it helps the people that are listening to your story realize that they aren't facing their challenges alone, that they have a support system or people around them that are helping them along in their journey. But then they also, somebody might not agree with me or have my point of view on everything. But as I introduce other people in my story, my spouse and, how understanding she is through this journey, or a former boss or former partners that I had personally that got me to be fired from being a financial advisor that helped me start my entrepreneurial journey, right? You introduce these other characters, you show different points of view. And again, it invites and welcomes people with different backgrounds to understand and see how you can help them, by virtue of the experiences that the people that you have been around you have had as well. Okay, so think of, and again, you don't have to start your story with saying, here's the conflict and here's everybody that was involved in it. No, you introduce the characters as they come into your story. Let's use Star Wars again as the example. Who are the first characters that we meet? Luke Skywalker is the hero of that story, is the main character of that story. Is he the first person that we meet? No. Is Darth Vader the first person? No. Is Princess Leia the first person? No. The first characters we meet are R2-D2 and C-3PO. We meet them. They are the two that brought the conflict to Luke Skywalker. Okay? And so we meet R2-D2. And then we meet the rebels, and then we meet the stormtroopers, and then we meet Darth Vader, and then we meet Princess Leia. And then, we go down to the planet where we still don't meet Luke immediately. We meet the Jawas, and we meet Luke's aunt and uncle, and then we meet Luke, and then we meet Obi-Wan Kenobi, and then we meet, right? Do you see how these characters, when you're talking about them and introducing them, you introduce them as they come into your story. Okay, so if you had something that brought the conflict to you, you talk about that. And then, there's this. And then if you met your version of an Obi-Wan Kenobi, you talk about how you found him, right? Or her, right? And when you introduce these key characters, again, it shows that you have a cast of people supporting you. And by virtue, they're supporting the people that you're wanting to serve. And it helps them understand they're not alone, but also gives you more points of contact and connection between you and the audience. Okay, so introduce the key characters. Now, that's all. Those two are, introducing conflict, and the key characters are beginning part of the story. Okay, this next one, step number 5, is also a component in the beginning of the story, and that is name an enemy. There's someone that brought the conflict into your world. And that conflict, again, could be something like a loss of a job, a loss of a loved one, an ending of a relationship, a health thing, a worldwide global pandemic, an economic downturn, right? It could be anything. That conflict can be anything. But there was a vehicle, there was something that brought the conflict to you. You need to name that enemy. Just like in Star Wars, they say the evil empire and Darth Vader, and we know who the bad guys are in the story. When you are specific and again name that enemy, you draw a line in the sand that again gets people to side and come with you, or gets them to go away or root against you. Which, when in business, that's a good thing. Okay, you think of the Apple versus Android debacle, or Coke versus Pepsi, right? There's all these different things. They draw a line in the sand, they name an enemy that their cause is against. Okay? The rebellion was against the empire. And when we see that they're a ragtag bunch of underdogs and they're outmanned and outgunned and outnumbered, we root for them. Okay? And we want the empire to lose. Even though Darth Vader is my favorite character, I still am glad that the bad guys lost. That's just a human nature, okay? So naming an enemy. Now I'll give this little disclaimer that if you are still in contact with this enemy, if it's an actual person, or if it's like your boss or something like that, you don't have to name it specifically by name in those circumstances, because you don't want to cause any extra drama, or you don't want to be seen as slandering somebody else, that kind of stuff. Like for me, when I had some partners that I worked with as a financial advisor, and it was amazing, and my business and my income was higher than I'd ever had in my life at that time. And two of my partners, who were father and son, decided they wanted to go ahead without my help anymore. And I had to restart my financial practice 3 years in, with my everything just dried up and having to start over, and I didn't recover from it. Okay? I would never recommend anyone ever work with them in any way ever. Okay? They were not good people. And I learned that the hard way. But I don't call them out by name. I just talk about my former partners, right? So use some discretion with it, but whenever you can, name that enemy. Okay? Name those. Let's see. Sheldon drops his comment. He's like, good point. That's my dilemma when doing stories, not to bring others down, telling the story. And that's the thing is like when you're being specific, and that's one of the steps in this framework as well. It's very, very good. But at the same time, you're wanting to share and help people understand the conflict and the things that you've overcome, but you don't want to drag them down and beat them up because they're going through their own struggles right now. They don't need you to be lumping your trials and everything on top of theirs. Okay. This is when we talk about those things and we talk about individuals or what brings the conflict, it gives us common ground. We're not casting our troubles upon them. We're letting them know, hey, you're not alone in this. I've gone through struggles too. I might have gone through the same struggles that you are going through. Come along, right? And that's the power of introducing the conflict early, introducing the key characters, and naming an enemy. And those are all things that you need to do in the beginning sections of your story. There are more things into it, but we don't have time to go through those in deep details, okay? Now we transition to the middle of the story, which is all about raising the stakes. So step number 6 is raise the stakes. Are you guys still with me? You still getting this? Okay. Step number 6 is raise the stakes. Now, the middle part of our story of great stories is all about growing the conflict. Okay. So let's just use Star Wars as an example. Again, then we'll break it down and show you this for business. But like Star Wars, at the beginning, we meet the Empire and the Rebels and Princess Leia and Luke and Obi-Wan and Ben or Han and Chewie and all these different types of things. And we learn that the Death Star has the ability to destroy a planet. Okay? We know that it has the capability, but we haven't seen it yet. Now, as we transition to the middle of that story, when Luke says, okay, I will go with you, Obi-Wan, let's go and do this, go on this adventure, right? As they go forward, on the way there, we learn and we see the Death Star blow up a planet. So we knew that it had the capability, but now we know that it actually can execute and do what people have been fearful that it can do. Now, do you see how the conflict before was just a period of civil war, right? And the conflict came and all these things happened, but now the stakes have been raised. The Empire now has something that is proven to work and it blows up entire planets like that. Okay? So now we have seen it. Do you see how the conflict becomes more interesting? Now, Obi-Wan and Luke and Han and Chewie arrive on scene in the Millennium Falcon, but guess what? Alderaan, the place that they were supposed to go, isn't there. They're like, what's going on? And then they get caught by the tractor beam of the Death Star. Conflict has been evolved. The stakes have been raised. Now they're being trapped by the Empire and caught by them. Now they have to rescue the princess from the space station. They have to disable the tractor beam to get the ship to be able to fly away. All of these things. You see how the conflict and the stakes are raised through that story. And they continue to get raised throughout the rest of it. When you raise the stakes in your story, when you show that the conflict that came into your life becomes more complex, this is what happens. This is the journey that happens with your audience member. They really connect to your cause and they root for you and they want you to be victorious. Just like we wanted, them to save the princess and we wanted them to be able to disable the tractor beam and we wanted them to be able to escape, all that kind of stuff. Okay. The conflict, as it rises and the stakes are raised, the audience really just gets pulled into our world even more. Okay. And they have an emotional connection to us. At first they might've been like, yeah, that's a good cause. I think I'll support that. Or I want to see where this is going. Now it's like, oh, they've got to win. And they get the butterflies, right? Like when Obi-Wan Kenobi dies at the hand of Darth Vader, we feel that as an audience. We're like, no, oh, what are they going to do now, right? We have that emotional response. And when you share those things, let's just use for an example, a part of my story. Okay. I started my business in 2015, a video production company, because I was fired for not hitting my sales goals and requirements as a financial advisor. So I had to start over from nothing. And, like I mentioned, I worked in film and TV and commercials and news, and all those kinds of things. And now I work with entrepreneurs and businesses to help them tell their story. There was conflict at the beginning, right? And you understood why I started my business. But how did I get to working in film and TV and commercials and news and back to entrepreneurs? There was nothing that moved that story along. Conflict and raising the stakes moves the story forward. Okay. And so when I started a video production company, I didn't have a camera. I didn't have any money. I didn't know anybody. I was trying to get clients. And I got a couple, but I was only making like $250 for a video. I was putting a lot of hours and time into it, and it just wasn't working. So I had to find a way to be able to pay the bills for my family. Because I have 4 young kids. We were renting a basement apartment. We were on food stamps and Medicaid. We were reliant on everybody else to be able to help us to live every day. And I needed to get money coming in to pay our bills. So I started and found an opportunity to become a freelance photojournalist for NBC. I started telling stories and working with people and telling these news stories in a fast-paced environment. And I got really, really good. I was making $20 an hour, and which was okay, but still it wasn't enough. And so I started thinking, I'm spending a lot of time doing a lot of different things. I was doing all the camera work, the lighting, the sound, the editing. I was doing the interviews because you rarely go out with an actual reporter when you're a freelancer. So I was having to be a journalist as well. And so I wanted to see what it was like to get on Hollywood sets, because I figured if I could specialize in one area as opposed to wearing a lot of different hats, I could make more money. And plus Hollywood, they make lots of money, right? I figured I would make more money. So I started doing that. And I found ways on set, and I was an unpaid intern at the beginning, and as a 35-year-old, handing out water bottles and snacks to the cast and crew. But my work ethic and all those things got me invited back again and again and again. I started getting paid, and it was awesome. And I started to do amazing things. And I was hanging out with Hollywood producers and A-list actors and directors and all these things, Oscar winners, and it was so fun. But I was only making, like, on really good sets, $300 to $400 a day. But I still wasn't very much money. I wasn't meeting the needs and providing like I needed to for my family. And it was frustrating because, again, we were still on food stamps and Medicaid and all these things. And I was working 12 to 16-hour days, being physically and mentally exhausted at the end of the week, having less than 2 days to get recouped and go back again early on Monday morning. It was brutal. And on top of that, I was being audited. I found out I was being audited by the state to see if we had received too much help in the food stamp program. Okay? And so I was like, something's got to change. And I wanted to focus back on helping businesses with their stories. And I used my skills. But do you see how the conflict and the stakes were raised? How the conflict evolved? That is what moves the story forward. That is what gets you to connect with me. If you didn't know those things in my story, now you do, and you have a better understanding of me. And you're like, oh man, and if I had time, I would go and break this all down, or, share my whole story with you, and you would be connected to me. And you'd be like, wow. Because I've had so many people who have heard my story come up and say, wow, right? That is what raising the stakes is all about. Let's go back to Star Wars to reinforce this really quickly at the end, towards the end of the movie. The stakes are raised. The rebellion escapes, or Luke and those guys escape the Death Star. They take the plans to the rebels, and they decide to go on a full-on offensive to take down this space station. And they're highly outnumbered and outmanned. But they go anyway. And we see that these ships go in and they try and shoot their torpedo to blow up the Death Star. And the first group of ships go in and they all get annihilated. And, they all get blown up. Meanwhile, the Death Star is close to the Rebel base and is trying to clear a planet to be able to have a clear shot at the Rebel base. So that's happening, and the clock is ticking. The time bomb, the fuse has been lit, right? Then the next group of ships goes down, and two of the ships get blown up, and the last one actually gets a shot off, but it misses. And it's like, oh no, the clock's ticking down even more. There's the Death Star is almost clear to shoot. Then Luke gets sent down. He goes down in the trench, and they're doing their attack run, and then his one of his wingmen, Wedge Antilles, gets hit critically in his ship, and he has to withdraw. So he loses part of his backup. He has one other wingman that is his last friend from back home on Tatooine, Biggs Darklighter. I'm geeking out on the names and stuff, but he gets blown up. So Luke's wingmen are gone. His last friend from back home is dead, and it's just him going down. And so he's going, and then all of a sudden, Luke's R2 unit, R2D2 in his ship. Darth Vader gets off a shot and hits R2D2, and R2D2 is done. So he lost his technology help. He's all by himself. And then he hears a voice of Obi-Wan Kenobi saying, "Use the Force." And he turns off his targeting computer. He removes all of his technology and everything to help, so it's reliant solely upon him. And at the same time, the Death Star has now cleared the planet. They've started the power-up sequence to be able to shoot and blow up the planet that the Rebel base is on. Luke takes a deep breath, shoots, it goes in the exhaust port, goes down. Do you see how the conflict got to where if he missed that shot, game over for the Rebels? That is the perfect example of raising the stakes. Now, you might not have your story might not have the high drama of interspace shooting down a space station, right? But the concept, the principles are there. Okay, so that is raising the stakes. That was a lot. I went a little deeper there. But I wanted to help you understand. Does that make sense? Do you see how raising the stakes is important in your journey, but also in the audience's journey in your story? Okay, so step number 7, be detailed. Okay, we should be detailed in our stories. Now, when I say be detailed, I'm talking about sights, smells, emotions, the people that we shared it with. You know, when I was talking about that trench run with Luke Skywalker, and I'm sharing all these details, you understand the gravity of the situation, right? But you also build more connection points between you and the audience. When you gloss over details, you can still get your point across. But when you are descriptive and bring those details to the forefront, amazing things happen. My Friendly Giant Films video, people call it the Star Wars video. I tell a story about going to the movies with my grandma. And I could have just said, one of my fondest memories is going to the movies with my grandma. And I remember how awesome it was. And it was just a great time. And now right? I could just go through and gloss over it. But instead, I talk about how I remember the smell of popcorn. I remember the way that my shoes stuck to the floor. The music, or the lights dimming, the music swelling, the characters in the movie. It was Return of the Jedi that we went and saw. Darth Vader dying, Princess Leia in a bikini, all these details that I share. And then I connect it to an emotion. It was raw and real, and I'll always remember the way that it made me feel. That's what I say in the video. Now, whether you had a great relationship with your grandma or a fond memory of doing something like that, you may or you may not. But everyone has a grandparent, so there's a connection point, right? Most everyone that I know has gone to the movies at least once. They know the smell of popcorn. They've experienced to one degree the way that your shoes stick to the floor in a movie theater. Lights dimming, music swelling. All of those details build connection points that where if they didn't have a similar perfect exact experience like I do, now they're reliving and having memories of their own come up in their mind, but they're also living my experience. And that connects them to me. So be detailed. Don't gloss over those things. If you felt a certain way, if you remember the smell of the hospital room or, that kind of stuff, describe it because it draws the audience in even more. Storytelling for our business is all about getting people to choose us and come to us. This just amplifies and multiplies and strengthens that connection as we build through the story, okay? And then step number 8 is be genuine, okay? You have to be real in your stories. Now, being genuine is kind of like twofold. One, if you fake or make up parts of your story that aren't true, or you borrow ideas from other people, it will not work. It's not a matter of if, but when it's found out that you made that stuff up. Think of Jay Shetty, for example. He got busted for kind of plagiarizing some other people's stuff. And it did a lot of damage to his reputation. So be genuine. Don't fudge or make up parts of your story in order to be more sensational or more dramatic, okay? Because eventually the truth is going to come out. And whatever trust that you built through those stories is going to be lost immediately and almost impossible to regain once it's gone. Okay. So that's the first part of being genuine. But number 2 is like, people are like, oh, I can't make myself cry or get emotional on camera or when I tell my story. Don't fake that stuff either. You want to know why? Because it does not translate well. It is very transparent when somebody's faking being emotional. Unless you're like Tom Hanks or, somebody who's a trained award-winning actor, it's very hard to fake that kind of stuff. And don't feel like you have to get emotional or to cry in order for people to connect with you. It's not true. You don't have to have that happen. But when you're genuine, when you're coming from a true place, wanting to help people, wanting to get them results and to grow and all these kinds of things, your message comes out from a genuine place and it connects with them. Okay. So step number 8, be genuine. Don't fake it. Don't force yourself to be emotional. Okay. Michael is on. What is up, dude? Good to see you, man. From Miami Beach. So that is step number 8. Now let's transition to the last step number 9 in this framework. And if you do not do this one, if you skip it completely, you might as well just throw the rest of the framework out and throw a match on it. Okay. It's absolutely pointless to do the other 8 steps if you're not going to do step number 9. And step number 9 gets a lot of people. Okay. It's what holds a lot of people back. And it's do it now. Don't wait. You have to tell your stories now. You can't be saying when I have 5,000 followers or X, whatever it is. Like, don't give yourself these numbers or things as a benchmark to start telling your story. Okay. And this is why you have to do it now and don't wait. For me, back in 2017, when I made the transition out of film to doing my own marketing and building up all these kinds of things for my own business, I started doing Facebook Lives in the spring of 2018. I did one every day. And guess what? I did not have a list. I did not have connections. I did not have anyone to lean on to help introduce me or bring me into a community. I had to do it myself. And if I would have been discouraged and I would have been like, oh, well, I can't, I'll wait until I've got a bigger audience to start sharing this good stuff, then I never would have done it. And we wouldn't be sitting here right now, you and I looking eye to eye, having this conversation or talking about this stuff. We wouldn't. But I went live every day. I've done over 1,000 Facebook Lives in 2 years. I've been on podcasts. I've been a presenter in virtual summits. I've spoken on stage. I've created marketing pieces for my own business, all these different things. And I've done it over the last 2 years because I needed to do it. I needed to build my audience. I wanted to attract the right people to me. And the fact that I didn't wait, the fact that I did it now or did it then, right, as opposed to waiting, is the reason why you and I are sitting here together right now. What is up, Mike? Okay. Yeah, great plug. Hashtag now. So let me give you an example of this, of how powerful doing it now and not waiting is. Back in 2018, I was in the habit of doing a Facebook Live every day. And sometimes, even when you're following the framework and beginning with the end in mind and having an intention, sometimes you get stuck, right? But I had made a commitment to go live every day to myself and to my audience. And I was stumped. I didn't know what to talk about. And so I could have easily been like, you know what? I made up an excuse. I can't do this today, or whatever it might be. But instead I said, I've made this commitment. I'm just going to go live and just share what comes to my heart. That will be the message today. Okay. And so I did that. And the message I shared that day was something about like, just keep going, go one more step, don't give up, that kind of stuff. And so so I did that live, and it got the normal engagement, got comments and all that kind of stuff. Nothing spectacular about it. It wasn't like I had this groundbreaking thing and a million people messaged me and wanted to say, take my money or anything like that. Okay. But here's what happened. Pardon me. Here's what happened. About 20 minutes, half an hour after I finished that live, I got a message in my box from a young lady that I knew from a previous, where we used to live. We were in the same church, so we would see each other at functions and things like that. We were friends on Facebook, but we never interacted online ever. Excuse me. And then only occasionally would we interact in person. But she saw that live that day, and she sent me a message and said, hey, I'd like to thank you for your live today. And she went into this story about what was going on in her life. She had recently got married, and she was pregnant with their first child. And this pregnancy was very challenging. She had medical issues. She was in and out of the hospital. It was just a very stressful time. And it was like some of her family and friends accused her of faking it for attention, all these kinds of things, when it was a legitimate health issue. And she was just so frustrated by all of it. Add on top of that the man that she married was not the man that she thought he was. And so she was in the middle of filing for divorce and getting out of that abusive relationship, all while being pregnant with their first child and having health issues on top of it. And she was feeling overwhelmed. And she told me that she was contemplating taking her life. But she saw my live that day. She saw it, and she said, and I saw your live, and it inspired me and reminded me to just keep going one more day. Just one more day, just one more day. And before I know it, my baby will be here. I won't be sick anymore, and everything will be okay. Me choosing to do it now, not waiting, saved a life, 2 lives, saved a lot of heartache. Now, that wasn't my intention. When I begin with the end in mind, I was like, I want to share something that's going to save somebody from potentially committing suicide. That was never on the radar of what I wanted to do, but yet that was the outcome. And it was powerful. And I hope I never have to have a conversation like that again, but I'm glad that I did, because it reiterated to me how important it is to do it now and to not be selfish. If you have put off telling your stories, it's because you're selfish. Now, I understand if you've tried it in the past and it didn't work, or you get frustrated because you don't know where to start and all of those things, and that's held you back. I get it. I've given you this framework now to be able to go out and do it. If you are equipped with these tools and this knowledge, but you continue to put it off because it's a little uncomfortable, or you're, afraid of being embarrassed, or what are people going to think, or any reason that keeps you from doing it, you're being selfish. So do it now. Don't wait. You never know. I have multiple times a week in my inboxes on Instagram and on Facebook. And back when we used to have live events, when I go to events, I have had so many people, I've lost count. I've had so many people come up to me and thank me for my story, or tell me about how they heard my Facebook Live over here, or they heard this podcast interview, or whatever, and it changed their life, or it helped them understand that they could go forward, or it gave them the courage to jump in and do their thing, or they wanted to hire me to help them do X, Y, or Z. It happens all the time. You never know. And a lot of these people, I had no idea even existed in the world before that moment. People are searching for your voice. They're looking for it right now. They might not know that they're looking for Sheldon's voice specifically, or Michael's voice, or Mike, or, whoever it might be. But they will hear your voice and they will recognize it, and it will change their life. It will save their relationships. It will save their business, or it'll do amazing things for them. But if you keep quiet and keep being selfish, you're not doing anyone any favors, and you're keeping them in the dark and in pain. Okay? So that is why you need to do it now and don't wait. Let me look at this comment. Mike says, your storytelling is priceless. With your experiences throughout the years in filmmaking, it's clear you have an understanding that takes to walk through a person through a story. When you're at an experience in marketing, boom, right? It's true. Now, that is the fun that I get to have. Like this framework, I use it all the time. This isn't for me. I know all this stuff. It's for you. Because I know that you get overwhelmed or frustrated or afraid to share your stories because you don't know how. I have been through lots of craziness. I have had sleepless nights. I have shed tears. I have screamed in anger and frustration. I have prayed to God and asked him what the heck is going on. When's this going to change? All of these things. I know the fear and the frustration and all this stuff. But all of the pain that I have gone through is to prepare me to serve you. That's where this framework came from. Okay? It is my life's purpose to help you with your stories. Okay? And I have this free resource. Again, if you go to friendlygiantfilms.com, you can download it for free. I also have a storytelling framework masterclass where we go, like, if you thought we went deep today in these 9 steps, your mind will be blown about how deep we go in and show you tactical, real life, real world examples of these steps in action to help you understand how you can do this and how to structure your stories so that you can become a master seller. If you look at like guys like Dean Graziosi or Tony Robbins or any of these gurus and these amazing, amazing individuals, if you want to be able to sell like they do, this framework is how you're going to be able to do it. You're going to level that playing field. You're going to compress the time frame of learning just by publishing. Okay, I have tons of resources to share with you guys. And if you want to have a deeper dive than just what we talked about today, message me or drop a comment and I can get you the resources to the Storytelling Framework Masterclass. And it's not like a $2,000 or $1,000 thing. It's a low cost $97 thing because I wanted to keep it low to give everyone the opportunity to have access to the tools that they actually need. And it's not just like 3 pages of a couple questions to ask yourself. This is like 9 deep video lessons. I have a template that you can build your stories upon. I have a self-critiquing checklist, MP3 recordings, all sorts of amazing things. I'd be happy to get you in touch with those too. But whether you do that or not, start telling your stories. It's worth it to invest dinner in a movie, I would say, in my mind, to get better at your storytelling. You will get better. I had one lady who came through. I did the video trainings I did like almost a month and a half ago, 2 months ago almost. And she came through halfway. She missed like the first 4 steps. She came into raising the stakes. So she missed the first 5 steps of the framework training. She came in on raising the stakes, and guess what? She put that to work and she got immediate results. Okay? So again, it wasn't my intention to be like, oh, go and buy this thing. But I'm telling you, if you want to be able to refer back to, go to storytelling or go to, storytellingframeworks.com, and you can get in the masterclass. But just refer back to this. But if you want to take it to the next level and get like even more clarity on what needs to go into the stories and how to structure them so that they sell your stuff, then that would be a good investment in my mind. Of course, I'm biased because I create it. But again, I know this. I do this all day, every day. Like amazing people like Sheldon and Michael who are on this. We've connected and we've hung out and we've met and all this kind of stuff. And it's just been, we have relationships, and it's because of the stories that we've shared individually, one-on-one, but also in just our connection and things like that. If you want your audience, your customers, your clients to have those kinds of relationships to you, then that's what you need to do. Okay. So, yeah. So with that, if that's something that you want to learn more of, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have about it at all, you can do it right here in the comments, or we can talk off when I'm finished or in DMs and stuff. But I'm happy to answer any questions to help you understand how the Storytelling Framework Masterclass will work for your business and for your stories too. So just shoot me a comment or a message and I can get you the link or answer any questions that you want. But remember, whether you partner with an expert like me who has 40 years of experience and tons of movies under his belt and all this stuff, or if you are going to keep trudging down on your own and figuring it out and chopping with your machete through the jungle, whatever you do, don't stop. Keep doing it. The world needs your story. People want your story. They're searching for it. They're craving it. They want to hear it. So share it. You'll change the world and theirs with your stories. Remember, it just takes one story. Talk to you guys later.